Hello and welcome to another GiantSlayer TFT how to play video. Today our analyst will be diving into how to play Warwick Reroll for patch 12.6. Warweek is upon us as somehow this composition managed to escape any major nerfs in the most recent patch. That said, keep an eye out for a future B patch as it may knock this doggo down a few pegs. In any case, for now, if you're looking to climb with a consistent reroll composition, Warwick is the way to go. As usual, we'll be covering core champions, traits, items, and augments, as well as a quick walkthrough for each stage of the game. With all that said, let's ow! But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT shows and tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Before we break down exactly how to play Warwick, let's first discuss why Warwick is so strong. Despite being a 2-cost, Warwick has the kit of essentially a 4-cost carry. By that we mean the synergies he has are both beneficial to his identity as a melee carry, and his passive not only heals him, but increases his damage output against high health targets by a good amount. For a 2-cost unit, that's pretty darn good. Mix in items and augments, and it's no wonder Warwick has been such a threat in Neon Knights. There are plenty of viable combat augments that boost his value alongside the easy pairing of Challenger Chemtech with Tryndamere. All of the ducks line up in a perfect row for Warwick to be a consistent, viable carry. Of course, Warwick does have downsides like CC and relying heavily on items, but being a 2-cost unit with only those limitations is fine. Those are basically the same problems a champion like Aurelia has, and she's a 4-cost. And Warwick arguably has better suited synergies as a carry than Aurelia does, as she only really benefits from Striker. All in all, there's a lot going for Warwick that makes him such a well-rounded carry. By far the largest reason he does well is the fact that players can easily 3-star him since he's only a 2-cost. As for how they can address this issue, well, beyond just gutting his stats entirely, it's unlikely that we'll be able to make any meaningful changes to Warwick. This means we should all get used to Warwick sticking around in the meta unless they do nerf him drastically. Time to move on to the core champions and traits for Warwick Reroll. Reroll compositions are inherently simple to play, and while there are variations, the core champions are usually the same. For Warwick, the 6 core champions most players aim for are Warwick, Tryndamere, Zac, Quinn, Camille, and Zillion. There's wiggle room here, as 5 Chemtech is normal to go for instead of 4 Challenger, though it depends on Warwick's items and the augments. For the most part, those 6 champions are what most boards aim for at level 6. Once you hit Warwick 3 and begin to level again is when things can get more interesting. 5 Chemtech is the most standard, so at level 8 all that needs to be added are 2 more Chemtech champions like Renata, Victor, or Singed. If instead you need more attack speed, then 2 additional challengers are also fine to play instead of 5 Chemtech. Again, this mostly comes down to items and augments. The only other common variation is 7 Chemtech, which generally requires either an emblem or augment. This is also best suited for Chemtech augments like Instant Injection or Chemical Overload, since the bulk of the board is going to be Chemtech units. At level 8, any champion is fine to add, but a 4th Challenger is the easiest addition since Quinn is a staple for most Warwick boards. Obviously, the main carry for Warwick Reroll is Warwick. The game plan is always the same: hit level 6 and reroll for Warwick 3. Additional champions you can 3-star include Tryndamere, Quinn, and Zillion, but none of them are must-haves, only Warwick is. In games where you do manage to hit Warwick but lack good items or augments, then both Tryndamere and Quinn can serve as secondary damage dealers. There's also a case for leaning into the AP tree with a focus on Renata or Victor, assuming you're able to get into the late game. Overall, don't sweat too much about the perfect composition for Warwick. The most important aspects are having both his traits active, items, augments, and of course, having Warwick 3. Next up, let's talk about the core items for Warwick. To be successful with Warwick requires near best in slot items, though depending on the lobby, it's not always necessary. Augments can certainly make up for a lack of certain items, but if you're looking for consistency, always aim to have at least 2 important items for Warwick. Those 2 are Titan's Resolve and Quicksilver. Titans isn't always a necessity, but it does serve an important role on Warwick: defense. Being a 2-cost unit, Warwick does lack in stats compared to higher cost carries. Titan's Resolve solves this by adding extra defense and some damage, both of which are perfect on Warwick. Plus, it's easy to stack being a melee challenger champion. Quicksilver, on the other hand, is a must-have because CC is Warwick's Wolfsbane. Being able to non-stop attack is what powers the Warwick engine, and CC interrupts that. The longer Warwick goes without attacking, the more likely he is to get killed off before being able to scale. There are ways around not having Quicksilver, such as Banshee's Claw or the Augment Verdant Veil, but the easy solution is to just have the Quicksilver. The third item is a lot more varied because there isn't a hard requirement on having Rageblade. Yes, Rageblade is good and we recommend it as the third item, but with Challenger, Clockwork, and Augments, it isn't always a necessity. That said, Rageblade does add scaling to Warwick, and as such is probably his third best item overall. Other viable items include Static Shiv for a bit of attack speed and magic resist shred, or Giant Slayer for the good old-fashioned boost in damage. More obscure item choices can be RFC, Edge of Night, and Hand of Justice. Certain emblems can also be decent, such as Mutant or Assassin. Items for the rest of your composition mainly depend on what you hit. Defensive frontline items can be decent for champions like Zac, additional carry items are good for Tryndamere, and Shojin is quite good on Quinn. None of these additional items matter all that much, so always focus on Warwick first. Secondary items are just that, secondary. Having mentioned emblems, the two best choices are either Chemtech or Challenger, since both of them open the door to more efficient compositions. There aren't too many other emblems worth playing, though Clockwork can be an okay choice as well as Mutant or Assassin for Warwick. Tactician's Crown is all around one of the better uses of a spatula, but keep in mind this generally eats up 2 components, so make sure you have at least 2 Warwick items secured. Finally, let's talk about Augments. First off, it is definitely viable to go 20/20 Warwick Reroll. Most low-cost reroll boards are due to the amount of champions available in the pool. Because Warwick is forceable every game, this opens up the door for a lot of Augments right away on 1/4. There's a huge list of viable options to choose from, but we recommend taking anything related to Warwick if it's available. If not, on 1/4, any Econ Augment is going to be useful since it propels you towards level 6 faster. We won't list every viable augment, but a few to keep in mind are Double Trouble, Featherweight, Cybernetic Augments, Knife's Edge, Chemtech Augments including emblems, hearts, or things like Instant Injection and Chemical Overload. Challenger Augments are the same, with On Guard being especially good. There's also plenty more passive augments like Backfoot, Battle Mage, and Disintegrator that pair well with Warwick. Point is, there are a lot of options when it comes to augments. On 1/4, we recommend anything that's especially good on Warwick, like Featherweights or On Guard. Otherwise, stick to generic augments that either boost your econ or board strength. Later on in the game, you can get more specific, as by the time 3/3 rolls around, you should already know whether or not you're committing to Warwick. On both 3/3 and 4/6, the choice should always be whatever directly benefits your Warwick board the most. That could be extra stats, trait benefits, or passive buffs. Try to stay away from econ options because combat augments will add a lot of board strength that helps Warwick scale in the late game, and a stronger economy rarely helps once you've hit level 6. Even though there are lots of options, the choice is usually pretty obvious. If you're presented with multiple augments that are good for Warwick, then we recommend taking what you need at the moment. To finish off our how to play, let's briefly break down each stage of the game, beginning with the early game. The opening carousel priority is usually going to either be bow or glove. Warwick uses a few bow items, but Quicksilver is arguably the most important item, so we recommend going for the least contested component between bow and glove to guarantee one of them. If both are unavailable, defensive item openers are always useful, or you can look for Quinn items with a sword, tier, rod, or belt. There isn't too much to do in stage 1 and 2 beyond picking up Chemtech units and looking for Warwick, Camille, Quinn, and Zillion. Warwick is on the weaker side by himself, but is playable alongside Chemtech and Challenger units, especially if you have items for him. But honestly, any opener is fine to do because the only major goal is to hit level 6 to begin rolling for Warwick. The major decision is whether or not you should aim to win streak or loss streak. If you have good starting components, meaning that you can make at least one must-have item for Warwick and another useful component, then aiming to win is fine. If you don't, we recommend trying to lose to get better priority on future carousels. There's nothing worse than win streaking when trying to play Warwick and not being able to secure the items for him because none of the components left as last pick are useful to him. Either way, the end goal for stage 2 is to hit Krugs with ideally 30 or more gold. If not, don't sweat it, but keep in mind that you'd be slower to hit level 6 to slow roll than other players. Krugs is also a good time to scout and see if anyone else is contesting you just to get an idea of where the lobby is at. The mid-game is where Warwick shines like a full moon because your board should come together easily at level 6. Once you are level 6, usually by 3-2 or 3-3, just slow roll your gold and look for Warwick 3. How quickly you hit is going to vary game to game, but ideally you want Warwick 3 by the end of stage 4. Keep in mind that if you're not hitting and losing badly every round, you may need to roll more gold to hit faster. Luckily, an upgraded level 6 board with decent items and augments with Warwick 2 is rarely going to hard lose every round, so you should be fine in most games. Just don't sit on your gold for too long if you're continually losing because Warwick 3 is a major power spike. As for the late game, well, all you need to do is level and add in any relevant champions to your board. There's no real secret to playing the late game for Warwick because once stage 5 hits, you should have him at tier 3 and be on your way to leveling to 7 and 8. If possible, try to level 9 because this makes hitting 2-star 5 costs a lot easier, and those usually round out the last spots of your board. Reality is, once you've hit Warwick 3, there's not a lot left to upgrade that will give you a major boost in power. Tryndamere 3 and Quinn 3 are definitely worth having, but don't stay too long at lower levels to roll for them if you're too far off of hitting them. Plus, they're only worthwhile to upgrade if you have items on them, as just hitting level 3 doesn't do a whole lot. Overall, the late game is mainly about positioning your Warwick away from burst damage, where you can scale and clean up the fight. Most of the work is in the mid game at level 6, so focus on that part of the game when playing Warwick Reroll. That's it for today's video, folks. For the most part, if you're forcing a lot of Warwick Reroll, you should be able to climb the ladder, since this composition is quite consistent at placing in the top 4. Keep in mind, a lot of players are contesting this composition, so always be willing to transition away from Warwick if need be. Let us know in the comment section below which composition you would like us to cover in our next How to Play video. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.